Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Protestant Education channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And if you guys will excuse me for just 1 second, I realize I needed to search up how to say something. Give me one moment here. So, today's Protestant figure is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German Lutheran theologian during the 30s and 40s. Bonhoeffer was a promising academic and theologian, writing The Cost of Discipleship, which is regarded by many as a classic of Christian thought despite its recency. Bonhoeffer's career would quickly be cut short as he would pivot his efforts to combat the rising Nazism in his country with Hitler's rise to power. As a matter of fact, only 2 days after Hitler became chancellor in Germany, Bonhoeffer would go on the radio to call the Nazi movement an idolatrous cult. He would consistently argue for Jewish rights, and there was this little tiff where his church had to write a statement about the Jews and turn it into the authorities of the Nazi Party. And it was changed over and over and over again, eventually to make it palatable to the Nazi regime. Bonhoeffer refused to sign this declaration. That's just one example of how he opposed the Nazi regime. He ran an underground seminary, and while running this underground seminary, he was holding up pacifist ideals. All throughout his opposition to the Nazi Party, Bonhoeffer has this real theological conviction about violence. And he decides to be a pacifist and believes in standing up against the Nazis while practicing pacifism and conscious objection. The seminary thing was really big. Like I said, he ran that underground. And during this time, Germany, the Nazi Party, was taking over the churches. They basically wanted the churches to reflect what they were saying, because Hitler thought that trying to win the war and trying to destroy the German church at the same time was a bad idea. Was just an idea that would take up too much of his resources and time. So his plan was to disseminate the church after winning the war. And the other big thing Bonhoeffer did to combat Nazism was join the Wehr. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That's the thing I was Googling real quick at the introduction here. He was introduced to the Wehr in America. And if you don't know what the Wehr were, they were an espionage group in Germany. They were technically an office of the Ministry of Defense, but under the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, they were technically not allowed to exist. Much of the Wehr had been under the totalitarian regime. There were many individual members in it that were opposed to Hitler, and this was part of the group that Bonhoeffer would be introduced to and join. A large group of Wehr agents would be involved in anti-Hitler plots, and this kind of led to a little spy versus spy between the Wehr and the Stasi, until Hitler ordered for the execution of the Wehr members. While being in this group, Bonhoeffer still upheld his values of nonviolent resistance and worked as a courier to the German resistance movement, helping transport information to them. Bonhoeffer wasn't executed with the rest of the MVER members, but he would, as he was a member of MVER, he would start to be silenced, and his theological writings and broadcasting and all of that would really be suppressed in Germany. And then eventually Bonhoeffer would be arrested by the Nazi Party. And on the 8th of April in 1945, Bonhoeffer was executed. This was only a couple of days after the Stasi had found some big plot with a couple of the MVER members and had ordered all of them executed. Bonhoeffer was executed along with 5 other dissidents of the Nazi Party. So, where does Bonhoeffer kind of stand out here? The thing that I think is really interesting to me personally about Bonhoeffer is his commitment to Christian pacifism. Pacifism, self-defense, all that. Those aren't really issues I've thought about too much at a theological level. I think the Bible does allow for self-defense. But even so, I think that if Bonhoeffer felt genuinely convicted about that, then that's a true conviction. And I admire his honoring to that conviction against some truly brutal enemies, being the Nazi Party, or the Nazis in Germany. This is something that you kind of see a lot with him. He was a very convicted man, and when he had a conviction, he was very strong in that conviction. I talked about the refusal to sign the Declaration. That came out of conviction. He didn't want to have his name attached to that because it's not something he agreed with. And so, well, I do think, there's a lot of room for us all to practice a little bit more Christian liberty and remember that we have Christian liberty. I still think that we should celebrate when somebody has a specific conviction and they hold to that specific conviction. But that's going to be all for me today. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe for more videos about Protestant figures and Protestantism. I hope to see you all in the next one. May you and your families have a very blessed rest of your day.